You're listening to Ghostumentary Scary Short Stories, original pieces updated throughout the week.
The Midnight Visitor. It was 1977, the year that the unexplainable entered Lawrence and Marjorie's life, and their world began to splinter into fear, confusion, and a creeping sense of doom. Their son, James, was only 18 months old, an age where children begin to form the earliest words, babbling nonsensically to the shadows in their rooms. At first, it was nothing more than innocent giggling, the kind that parents cherish, until it happened again. Every night at exactly midnight, they would hear the unmistakable sound of their son's laughter, and, more disturbingly, what seemed like another voice answering him. Lawrence would stir in bed, squinting at the clock as the echoes of strange, disjointed murmurs floated down the hall from James's room. Marjorie would sit up, her hands trembling as she listened to the unmistakable giggling of their child. But when they rushed to his room, the moment they opened the door, there was no one there, just their son, sitting in his crib, a huge grin on his face, eyes wide with wonder, as if nothing were amiss. Each night it grew stranger. James would tell them, his words barely comprehensible at his age, that a man came to visit him. "He dances, Mommy. He sings funny," James would say, his tiny hands miming an impossible dance. "He sings." But when pressed, the boy couldn't describe who the man was or what he looked like. He only said that he wasn't scared. He was entertained. At first, Lawrence thought it was just imagination, something children did, fantasizing about invisible friends. But as the days stretched on, as the giggles grew louder, the voices more distinct, something began to gnaw at him. The unease festered. Marjorie felt it too. They both tried to reason with themselves. There had to be a logical explanation. But none of it made sense. Then one night, Lawrence, determined to put an end to it, decided to stay in James's room. He'd had enough of these nightly disturbances. As midnight approached, he sat in a chair beside James's crib, his eyes narrowing in anticipation. But as the clock neared the hour, a strange noise from the kitchen startled him, a faint scraping sound, like something being dragged across the floor. Curiosity outweighed the fear, and Lawrence slipped out of the room, creeping toward the kitchen. The house was eerily still. The second he crossed the threshold into the hallway, a cold rush of air enveloped him. Before he could even think to look back, the door to James's room slammed shut behind him with a sharp click. Lawrence's heart skipped a beat as he turned around, grabbing the doorknob, but the door wouldn't budge. It was locked. And inside, James's giggle grew louder, faint but unmistakably joyful. His son's voice rang out, "He's singing, Daddy, he's dancing." It was then that Lawrence heard it, the voice of the other man. The song was soft, barely a hum at first, but the melody was unmistakable. It had an odd, guttural quality to it, haunting and out of place. It wasn't quite English, more of a chant, almost mocking in its cheerfulness. "James!" Lawrence shouted, his hands pounding on the door. "James! I'm coming!" But the boy's laughter continued, undeterred. In a frenzy of panic, Lawrence shoved against the door harder, each impact reverberating through his body. He hit it again and again, until finally, crack, the door splintered, and with one final push, it flew open. Inside, James was sitting up, his smile wider than Lawrence had ever seen it, a gleam of innocent excitement in his eyes. But there was no man. No one to account for the singing, the strange voice. The room was dark, save for a shadow that darted across the closet. It was tall and shapeless, but undeniably there. Without hesitation, Lawrence lunged toward the closet, throwing open the door. It was empty. Nothing but coats and an old vacuum cleaner. His heart pounded as he scooped up his son, his hands trembling. "We're leaving," Lawrence whispered, his voice unsteady. "We're leaving this house." That night, they packed what little they could carry and checked into a hotel. They didn't talk much. Marjorie's eyes were wide with fear. Lawrence barely slept, constantly listening for the sound of footsteps, the smell of something wrong. Every night they stayed awake in their beds, listening, waiting, but the eerie laughter never came. 2 weeks passed, and during that time, Lawrence arranged to sell the house. But before they could put it on the market, the realtor suggested they make a few repairs. Paint over old stains, fix the broken window in the kitchen. So they returned. The house was cold and lifeless, but it felt better, safer even. At dusk, Lawrence made it clear to Marjorie that they would leave before nightfall. He wasn't willing to tempt fate again. He wouldn't be here when the dark figure came back. A few days later, they moved into their new home, empty and sterile, but they didn't care. They were free from the horrors of the past. Or so they thought. The movers arrived at the new house in the morning, a young driver who looked visibly uncomfortable. When Lawrence asked him what was wrong, the man hesitated, looking over his shoulder before answering. "Last night," he said, his voice hoarse. "I stayed in the cab, didn't want to leave the truck. Around midnight, I thought heard singing. Something soft, but loud enough to hear from the truck." Lawrence's blood ran cold. It wasn't the house. It wasn't the boy. It was something they had brought with them. Something in the house. Something that had followed them. But which item? What was the source of the evil? He had to act fast. One by one, Lawrence went through the boxes, looking for the thing that might have caused it all. A new kitchen table, a simple, unassuming piece. He threw it in the backyard fire. Next was a hand-me-down mixer from Marjorie's grandmother, a woman who had passed away in her home. Could it be her lingering spirit? He didn't take the chance. Into the fire it went. Item after item, Lawrence burned it all. Dresser, clothing, photographs. Each one was sacrificed in a desperate bid to rid himself of the curse. But as the fire grew hotter, the air heavy with smoke, Lawrence knew something was wrong. The flames were spreading uncontrollably, licking at the air, and before he knew it, the entire backyard was consumed. He couldn't stop it. The fire reached the house. In a matter of moments, everything they had was gone, reduced to ashes. 2 weeks later, after the insurance claim was settled, Lawrence found himself alone in a small, bare home. The only thing he still owned was his own stubbornness and his isolation. The memories of the past haunted him still, but the ghost never returned. Days turned into years. The house was gone. His family was gone. Even Marjorie and James had moved on. The years rolled by, 27 of them. Then one night, James, now a grown man, was woken by his daughter's laughter. At midnight, he rushed into her room, his heart racing. And there, standing at the foot of the bed, was the same dark figure, dancing and singing in the shadows. James froze. It didn't hurt her. It didn't harm her. It just made her laugh. Was it the same figure? The same song? James understood now. His father's obsession had ruined their lives. What Lawrence had feared most, the ghost, the dark figure, had never meant to harm them. It only wanted to make them laugh. And now it was James's turn. The past had come full circle. And perhaps, if Lawrence had only stopped running, he might have found peace.
Looking for more scary tales? Subscribe to our podcast and visit ghostumentary.com. Let us know what you think or share with us your scary tales. We might just make a new story from it.